Hello everybody, I am Insomniac, and today we're going to take a look at the new patch for For Honor, which is the 1.06 patch, and at the moment this is only out on PC, but you console guys should get it relatively soon. So yeah, this patch mostly focused on the stability and the connectivity problems of the game, but this is not what I'm talking about in this video, as this is mostly uninteresting. The only thing that you have to know is that your game is less likely to disconnect or crash in the middle of a match, and it should also be easier for the game to find you a game. So yeah, that's basically it. Obviously I will leave the patch notes down in the description so that you can read up on all of this stuff if you're really interested, because I'm not really talking about all of those changes. I'm here to talk about the balancing changes that were made in this 1.06 patch. So, half of the cast was changed in either minor or more significant ways, and we're starting off with Peacekeeper. The developers have said that Peacekeeper had two problems, one of which being her zone attack, which they tried to address in the last patch, which I've also made a video about, and they now addressed her light attack spam in this patch, more or less successfully, that is. So the changes were that the window for her to chain her first light into the second one has been increased by 100 milliseconds, which is not exactly a nerf, but yeah, that was one of the changes. And now the two nerfs to her light attacks. She now has a longer recovery time up on the second light attack being blocked, and that went from 600 milliseconds recovery up to 700 milliseconds recovery. Now that doesn't sound like a big change, and honestly it really isn't, but at least that makes it harder for Peacekeeper to continue on spamming. The bigger nerf, however, was that Peacekeeper now has a 700 millisecond recovery time on hit. Not on block, on hit. And that went up from 500 milliseconds. So this 200 millisecond increase should make it harder for Peacekeeper to spam her light attacks after hitting or blocking them, and I can see how that would be correct. But honestly, you don't really feel the change at all. Like, yes, it is different, but you're not really going to notice it all too much. And some people have even speculated about a stealth nerf that was done to Peacekeeper, and from my understanding, the change was supposed to increase the width recovery and how much tracking the second light has, and the nerf was supposed to be the tracking being less so that she doesn't move forward all too much. Yes, it is true that the width recovery on her second light is larger than most other light attacks in the game, but it is still not significant enough to the point where you can scout out the second light and dodge it and then get a guaranteed guard break after that. So even if this stealth nerf exists, it really doesn't change up Peacekeeper all too heavily. She is still one of the best, if not the best hero in this game still, even after those two last nerfs. So not all too significant changes there. One of the more significant changes though was Lawbringer, in that his shove and shove light attacks specifically got changed in, to me at least, confusing ways, as the developers list here on the patch notes that there was a bug fix, and that bug fix was that you can no longer block the light attack after shove, which baffles me because in this same patch they addressed Warden's shoulder bash vortex, and we're gonna talk about that right after Lawbringer. And the reason why this baffles me is because they didn't change the animation for the light, so it doesn't have the unblockable glow even though it is unblockable, which is something that I don't really understand, but oh well. And the problem is not that the light is unblockable, the problem is that Lawbringer can get a shove after blocking a move, and that shove is unavoidable, and that gives Lawbringer a 50-50 situation, as he can either go into a light attack or a guard break after that, after block shove. Many people have already told me it's not a true 50-50, so don't even worry about it, you can react to it. But my experience, and the experience of a lot of other people, has also been that this is in fact a true 50-50, as the light attack is so fast that you can't really react to it. And before any one of you says, well, you're just too bad to dodge it, try for yourself. Because if you could dodge it, your success rate has to be over 50%, because with 50%, 50%, it would be a 50-50. So if you have a significant difference above 50%, then okay, fair enough, you can dodge it. The problem is though that I have not seen anyone do it, even pro players, I have not seen do that consistently. So even if it theoretically might not be a true 50-50, in the heat of the moment, it might as well be one. So it baffles me that they are trying to fix Warden's Vortex and then give a 50-50 to someone like Lawbringer, which they have buffed extremely strong in the last patch. Yes, I understand the last patch was necessary, but this one definitely wasn't. Not at all. Now, I don't think Lawbringer is overpowered because of this, definitely not, but the thing is just this encourages Lawbringer players to play extremely lame. Basically, you can win as Lawbringer by just waiting for your opponent to attack you, and then not even parry, you can just simply block and then get a shove right afterwards, and then you get a 50-50 situation for doing absolutely nothing. So you get rewarded for not attacking, you don't even get rewarded for parrying, no, you get rewarded for blocking. Yeah, I don't understand that change at all. Yeah, Lawbringer is really lame now if you play him this way. Obviously you don't have to play him this way, and I imagine it to be extremely boring to play him this way, but if you really wanted to win, this is what you could do. And I can't really wrap my head around as to why this change was made, but oh well, for now, and I hope for now, we have to deal with this. On the other hand, there have also been some positive changes for Lawbringer, as the hit area of the shove and the after shove light have been changed, and changed in a positive way, which basically means it is easier for you to dodge the shove and the shove light, which are both good things, but again, if you can't dodge the shove and you're put into this 50-50 situation, it doesn't really matter all too much. So yes, this positive change exists. Does it do much for you? Not really. But speaking of Warden, as we have before, Warden got fixed quite significantly, but the only thing that's significant is the amount of changes that were done to him. So let me explain this. Warden's Shoulder Bash Vortex was completely brain dead, basically. You didn't really have to think all too much about what you're doing, you didn't really have to react to your opponent as Warden. You could just simply go into Shoulder Bash and let the 25-25-25-25 carry you, which is still true to a certain extent. The changes were, Warden pre-patch could cancel his shoulder bash into guard break throughout the entire animation of it, except for the last 100 milliseconds. Now this window has been decreased by 200 milliseconds, meaning that Warden can no longer cancel his shoulder bash into guard break in the last 300 milliseconds, so he has to commit to either shoulder bash or guard break earlier. So basically this change affects one specific situation a lot, as Wardens could go into shoulder bash and wait for their opponent to dodge and then react to the dodge by cancelling shoulder bash into guard break and catching them every single time, because that was not actually a guess for Warden, that was reactable. Now this window has been decreased by 200 milliseconds, making it a lot harder for Warden to do just that, but it is still possible to a certain extent. But yeah, that's a good change. Cancelling shoulder bash now has a 200 millisecond recovery time, because previously Warden could go into shoulder bash and then cancel it and he'd have no recovery whatsoever. So basically, if I was playing against Warden and I attacked a Warden that started up his shoulder bash and he cancelled it on reaction to me attacking him, even if he did that 1 millisecond before the hit would register, he'd still be able to block it. Now he has 200 milliseconds in which he cannot defend himself, which sounds good on paper and I appreciate the change, but it effectively does nothing. It really doesn't do a whole lot for you. Warden used to shout his voice lines when initiating shoulder bash like almost randomly. There was no certain reason why he said his voice lines, or there was no specific situation in which he would shout his voice lines, except for now the developers have changed it so that when Warden commits into shoulder bash, he will shout his voice lines, and as soon as he said his voice lines, you know that he can no longer cancel his shoulder bash, which is a nice change. A supposedly bigger change was that the miss recovery of shoulder bash was increased from 700 milliseconds, so safe, up to 800 milliseconds, which is still safe, but those exact 100 milliseconds make it so that you can guard break Warden a lot easier, but it still is no guaranteed guard break for you, or a guaranteed punish for that matter, so I guess it's a good change, but oh well. You can notice that, however. And the, in my personal eyes, biggest change was that Warden had 2 bug fixes. The less important one being that he can no longer bump or fall over non-locked on targets. That is nice that that doesn't happen anymore, but it is really not all too important. The bigger bug fix was that Warden can no longer stumble over his locked on enemy, which was very frustrating if that happened to you. Because basically, if Warden did his shoulder bash and he committed to it, and you dodged out of the way, but you still wanted to be close enough to punish him, which was already very hard to do, basically impossible for that matter, and if you were too close, Warden would bring you out of balance as well, basically making him safe even though you guessed right and tried to punish him, which was very, very frustrating, and it felt very, very broken, and luckily this has been fixed in this patch. So this is probably the biggest change that was done to Warden. But is this nerf significant? Is Warden dead now? Is he useless? Is he bottom tier? Absolutely not. No, Warden is still top tier. He is still one of the best, if again not the best character in the game. This patch at least brought him down from 100% brain dead to still 2 brain dead, but at least it's a change in the right direction, so I can appreciate it, even though it is definitely not enough. The next hero that was adjusted in this patch was Berserker, and they only fixed 1 bug, but it was a significant one. Basically, when Berserker got a guard break against a out of stamina opponent and he would throw them on the ground, his maximum punish was supposed to be side heavy into top heavy, which did like 93 damage or something like that. But under certain circumstances, Berserker's opponent would get up too early, denying him this insane punish. And I say insane as in this is the biggest punish in the game, and not insane as he shouldn't have that. I think he should have that. As the developers have said themselves, he should have this punish, and they have fixed it so that he can get this punish reliably now. The funny thing is just that Berserker got this change, but I have noticed that Orochi has the exact same bug, and he still has after the patch. Basically, I figured out what the glitch is, and I try to demonstrate it later on. Orochi's maximum punish was 2 top heavies after a side throw on a out of stamina opponent. But basically, Orochi's opponent would get up earlier if Orochi had to change his guard stance from one of the 2 sides to top before he could get both top heavies, which is very weird. And it's not like you would get 1 top heavy and the second one was too slow. You wouldn't even get the first one. So yeah, Orochi still has that glitch, or bug, whatever you want to call it. Since we're already talking about Orochi, I might as well talk about how he was affected in this last patch, and he got buffed. The amount of buffs that were done to him were not big, but the buff that he got was huge. His Hurricane Blast, so the deflect heavy attack, is now uninterruptible, and this is huge for Orochi. Before this patch, this move saw little to no use, and for good reason. The move was basically useless, as it is never guaranteed. No matter what you deflect, it is never guaranteed. Your opponent can always dodge out of the way, but something very frustrating could happen as well, and that is that Orochi could get hit out of this attack. The frustrating thing about that is, even if Orochi was able to successfully deflect an attack, whether that was a light or heavy attack, and he would go into the Hurricane Blast, if his opponent would just simply chain the deflected attack into another attack, most likely a light attack, Orochi's opponent would hit him out of the Hurricane Blast, and that was extremely frustrating and basically made the move useless. Most of the time the opponent didn't actually want to hit Orochi out of the move on purpose, they just happened to do so, and it felt extremely unfair that you as Orochi made the correct read and deflected an attack, and instead of going for the guaranteed light, you actually wanted to get a little more damage for your trouble, 50 instead of 25 by the way, and then your opponent was lucky enough to hit you out of it even though they didn't really want to do that on purpose. And I felt extremely stupid when that happened to you. But enough of me talking, let's actually show this off. We're here again in Orochi's move list with the Hurricane Blast Blast down at the bottom. And as you can see right here, Wind Gust still has the unblockable symbol, nothing changed there. And Hurricane Blast also has the unblockable symbol, but it now also has the armor symbol, the uninterruptibility stance, which is big for Orochi because not only does this prevent you from getting hit out of the Hurricane Blast, it also gives Orochi a much better chance to actually applying his Hurricane Blast cancel mix-ups, which involve a cancel into the Wind Gust, Guard Break or Dodge. Since Hurricane Blast is now armored, this also armors all of the other options for as long as they have not been cancelled fully. So for example, if you deflect your opponent's attack and you cancel into Hurricane Blast, and you think, okay, I think he's gonna dodge, but he hits you instead, you will tank the hit and you will guard break your opponent. Because if you try to do that without the uninterruptibility on Hurricane Blast, then your opponent would have hit you out of that cancel no matter what. Now, this also gives Orochi basically an armored Wind Gust, as he can go into Hurricane Blast, tank a hit, and then cancel it into Wind Gust. And it also gives Orochi an armored dodge in that sense. Not that the uninterruptibility on Wind Gust and Dodge was all too useful, but it is definitely useful on the Guard Break and Hurricane Blast itself. But besides all of those positive things that Hurricane Blast does for you, it does something very simple yet extremely important for Orochi. Basically, the difference between deflecting and parrying pre-patch was that parrying completely turned the momentum around in your favor, and deflecting didn't really do that for you if you cancel it into Hurricane Blast, as your opponent could continue the momentum and hit you out of the move that was supposed to turn the momentum in your favor. So that's why you always had to go for Wind Gust, as that was a guaranteed stop, not turnaround, but stop in the momentum for your opponent. Now that the Hurricane Blast is armored, this is a 100% momentum shift in Orochi's favor, because if the opponent does anything else but dodge at the right time, they're going to get hit by Hurricane Blast, and getting hit by Hurricane Blast is extremely hurtful. Wind Gust does 25 damage, so exactly 1 bar, but Wind Gust does 50 damage and is now uninterruptible, has really good tracking, and gives Orochi a lot of mix-ups, which are all uninterruptible as well. So this move went from basically useless to really useful. This now actually gives Orochi players an incentive to go for deflects instead of parries, because of parries the most damage you would get would be 35 for a top heavy. But now Hurricane Blast is the more damaging option, and you are a lot more likely to get it now. Or if you're not gonna get Hurricane Blast, you're gonna get one of the mix-ups. As you can see, Orochi now flashes white whenever he does this move. Now that Wind Gust is uninterruptible, this also makes all of the other options uninterruptible as well. And now to the last character that was affected in this patch, which is Shugoki. And Shugoki got the probably most significant changes in this patch. And even though we've heard about Lawbringer getting a 50-50, Warden's Vortex getting nerfed, PK's Lights getting nerfed, Orochi getting an armored deflect heavy, which is now one of his best, if not his best move, and Shugoki's changes are supposed to top all of that still? Now, obviously this is a dumb question if you already know these changes, but I guess that you wouldn't be watching this video if you already knew these changes. So let me tell you, pre-patch, and this is actually funny how I made a video talking about this tech, quote unquote, this is now completely gone, as Shugoki's Charge of the Oni no longer knocks opponents down. It has a 400 millisecond startup time in which the move doesn't do anything, and you cannot change its trajectory whilst the move is already active. You can still change the way you want to charge in those 400 milliseconds, but you will no longer be able to curve the trajectory, you will have to run in a straight line. And this makes the move basically useless. I'd rather have the move be as useless as it is now when compared to how overpowered and broken it was pre-patch. And even though he is one of my favorite characters, I still agree with those changes, but one thing I don't agree with, and that is that you don't knock people down anymore, and this is the big caveat here, if they're out of stamina. I think your opponent should still fall on the ground if you hit him with charge on the Oni if they're out of stamina. Because that would make sense, as when your opponent has green stamina, they have maximum balance, meaning that if you guard break them and throw them, they're not gonna fall on the ground. And if you parry them, they're also not going to fall on the ground. But if they're out of stamina and you either throw them or parry one of their moves, they are going to fall on the ground, and the game calls that out of balance. Now, Shugoki's run always, in that sense, brought his opponent out of balance. For me, it would make sense if Shugoki's charge of the Oni degrades the balance of the other hero, and if they already are in this imbalanced state when they're out of stamina, for me it would make sense if they fall over, but they actually don't. So the only thing that I would do to charge off the Oni now would be that it would still knock over players that are out of stamina. But that's the only thing that I would change. So now I'm going to show you these changes in action. The orange unblockable glow doesn't show up until 400 milliseconds of initiating the move, and this is basically the startup time that the move has right now. Then I can't adjust its trajectory when I activate it, but I can no longer curve the trajectory when I have already initiated my distance. As you can hear, I was flicking my stick and it didn't do anything. And as you can see right here, Peacekeeper doesn't get knocked over from it anymore. So yeah, this move is basically useless now, and that is not necessarily a bad thing, but I still wish that it would knock over people who are out of stamina, because that was the way I would use this move anyways. If I got my opponent out of stamina, which you're clearly trying to do because you have this headbutt that drains 75% of the opponent's stamina, so you already had the tools to get your opponent out of stamina. If I was actually able to get my opponent out of stamina, then it would only feel right if I would enforce this 50-50 on them and knock them over with this. But as you can see, they don't even fall over anymore when they're out of stamina. And that's the only complaint that I have with this move now, but other than that, I think this is completely fair, and Shugoki never should have had this cheesy dumb tactic to begin with. But yeah, those have been all the character changes in this patch. I hope you learned something, and if you did, please drop a like on the video, as it greatly helps me out. Subscribe if you want to see similar content to this video, and I will be uploading a Warlord tutorial right after uploading this video, so stay tuned for that. But again, thanks again so much for watching. Hope I'll see you next time. Take care.